In the spring of 1878, a municipal records clerk named Francis Devereux walked into the basement archive of the Paris Préfecture de Police, carrying a transfer order, a lantern, and a list of 37 document boxes scheduled for relocation to the new administrative building on the Lie de la Cité. He had worked in that archive for 9 years. He knew every shelf. He knew which boxes had not been touched in decades, and which the senior clerks still occasionally pulled. What he did not know, until that morning, was that a section of the archive's eastern wall, a section he had walked past 9 years of workdays without examining, was not a wall. It was a door. The transfer order required him to clear a shelf that ran along the base of that section, and when he moved the last box, he felt the draft. Cold, moving from behind dressed stone that had no business being hollow. He pressed the stone at the left edge, the way you press a thing when you already know it will move. It moved. Beyond it, cut into the limestone bedrock beneath the prefecture, was a descending staircase. He counted 19 steps before his lantern showed him the bottom. At the bottom was a chamber. In the chamber was a tower, not the remains of a tower, not a foundation stub or a rubble pile, a tower, standing, complete to its upper cornice, encased in the bedrock, as if the earth had risen around it over centuries and swallowed it whole. It stood 11 meters from base to crown. Its stone was a pale gray he had never seen in any Paris building above ground, and at its crown, where a tower's platform would normally open to the sky, was a sealed copper dome, green with age, fitted so precisely to the tower's circumference that Devereux, who was not an engineer, understood immediately that it had been placed there by someone who did not want anything to come out. The official record of the 1878 archive relocation at the Paris Préfecture de Police makes no mention of Francis Devereux. It does not mention a concealed door. It does not mention a staircase, a chamber, or a tower. The relocation is logged as completed in 6 days without incident, signed by the supervising archivist, and filed under an administrative routine accession that researchers today can request and read in full. Devereux himself submitted a written account of what he found to the supervising archivist, a man named Henri Caille, on the morning of the 2nd day. Caille's acknowledgment of that account, a single line in his own handwriting, dated April 9th, 1878, survives by accident, as a notation on the back of an unrelated inventory sheet that was misfiled in a different accession in 1881. It reads, Devereux account received. Matter referred upward. Clerk to be reassigned. Devereux was reassigned to a document processing post at a satellite office in the 14th arrondissement 3 days later. He never returned to the prefecture archive. He retired in 1891. He died in 1903. His account of what he found has never surfaced in any archive, any published record, or any institutional inventory. Devereux was not an unstable man. He was not a man given to embellishment or fantasy. He had spent 9 years as a municipal records clerk in one of the most demanding administrative bureaucracies in Europe, a position that required, above all things, precision of observation and accuracy of transcription. He was 41 years old in 1878. He had never filed a complaint, never received a formal reprimand, and had been rated by his superiors as reliable in every annual review. His granddaughter, in a letter written in 1934 to a colleague of her late husband's who was researching the history of the Prefecture building, wrote that Devereux had spoken of what he found only once, to his wife, and had told her 2 things. The first was that the tower in the chamber was not alone, that the chamber extended beyond what his lantern could reach, and that there was at least one further passage leading north in the direction of the Seine. The second was that he had not been reassigned because his superiors doubted him. He had been reassigned because Henri Cale had gone pale when he read the account and had said, in a voice Devereux described as drained of something, that this was not the first time. Before we go further, if you find these buried investigations as fascinating as I do, hit subscribe so the next one finds you when it drops. The algorithm tends to suppress this kind of research unless you tell it otherwise. To understand what Francis Devereux found beneath the Paris Prefecture, we have to go back, not just to the construction of that building, and not just to the towers that once stood above ground across the capitals of the 19th century. We have to go back to a question that the systematic demolition of a specific class of structures carried out across Europe, North America, and the colonial world between roughly 1820 and 1910 has never been asked out loud by any mainstream institution. Not why those towers were built, but what they were actually doing. The official history of urban towers built before the age of electricity describes them in one of three functional categories: bell towers, built for sound; clock towers, built for timekeeping; observation towers, built for surveillance or signal. These three categories cover, in the mainstream account, every tower of significance ever erected in a capital city. The account is tidy, and it is almost entirely wrong because it describes the stated purpose of structures whose actual technical specifications have never been fully analyzed, and whose destruction in city after city, decade after decade, was conducted with an urgency that no cultural or economic explanation has ever adequately justified. A structural engineer named Elias Van Thorp, who worked for the Office of Public Works in London from 1862 to 1889, was tasked in 1874 with assessing the structural condition of 7 surviving pre-Victorian towers in the City of London and the borough of Southwark, in preparation for a parliamentary committee review of urban heritage preservation. His assessment report, a 91-page document with hand-drawn elevations and technical annotations, was submitted to the office in March of 1875. The report is listed in the Office of Public Works archive at the National Archives in Kew under reference work 1288. The physical file behind that reference number contains the cover sheet, the table of contents, and pages 1 through 14. Pages 15 through 981 are absent. The file contains a handwritten note, undated, that reads, "Remainder withdrawn for review." See correspondence file. No correspondence file has been located under any cross-reference to work 1288. Van Thorp's report survives only in its opening section, which describes the methodology of his survey. What he found when he applied that methodology to 7 towers, what filled the missing 77 pages, is unknown. What is known is that all 7 towers he assessed were demolished between 1876 and 1884. All 7, within 10 years of his assessment, after centuries of standing. Van Thorp did not protest the demolitions. He did not publish an independent account. He did not write to the parliamentary committee whose review had originally commissioned his assessment. He completed his career at the Office of Public Works, retired in 1889, and died in 1896 in Kensington. He left behind professional papers that were donated to the Institution of Civil Engineers in London by his family in 1901. Those papers, drawings, correspondence, survey notes from 27 years of public works practice are catalogued in the institution's archive under a Van Thorp accession. A researcher who examined them in 1987 noted that the accession contains survey materials from every major project of Van Thorp's career except one. The 1874 London Tower assessment is not represented in the deposit. Not a page, not a note, not a single measurement from the 91-page report whose first 14 pages survive at Kew. His family donated everything else. That project alone is absent, as if someone, before the papers were donated, went through them and removed every trace of the towers he had spent a year measuring. There is a growing body of independent research suggesting that the official history of pre-industrial urban towers, particularly those built before 1700 across European capitals and their colonial extensions, is incomplete in ways that conventional architectural historians have consistently declined to investigate. The towers share characteristics that the standard functional categories cannot account for. Their walls are, in almost every documented case, significantly thicker than any acoustic, structural, or observational purpose requires. Their foundations are, in every case where excavation has been attempted, deeper than any above-ground structure of their height necessitates, sometimes by a factor of 3 or 4, and their interior vertical shafts, the hollow core that runs from base to summit in towers of every type from every period, are, in the majority of surviving examples, fitted with internal features whose purpose no conventional explanation of bell ringing or clock mounting has ever needed to address. Metal collars, anchoring brackets, recessed channels that run continuously from the base of the shaft to the crown, features that would be irrelevant to any tower built for sound or timekeeping, features that would be exactly what you would need if the shaft were designed to carry something, or to collect something, from the air above and direct it downward into the earth below. Washington, 1848. Construction crews breaking ground for the Washington Monuments Foundation on the National Mall encountered, at a depth of 12 feet, a stone-lined shaft of approximately 4 feet in diameter descending vertically into the bedrock. The shaft was documented in the field notes of the project's chief engineer, a West Point graduate named Thomas Casey, as pre-existing of unknown origin, and aligned precisely with the planned monument's central axis, as if the monument had been sited not by survey, but by the location of the shaft that was already there. Casey's field notes from the 1848 season are held in the Library of Congress Manuscript Division. The notation describing the shaft is on page 23 of the first survey volume. It has not been cited in any published history of the Washington Monument. Vienna, 1858. The demolition of the old Baroque Rathaus Tower on the Wipplingerstrasse, to make way for the new Ring Road development, produced a foreman's log entry describing the discovery, inside the tower's sealed interior shaft, of a fitted copper lining running from a depth of 4 feet below the tower's ground floor to the base of the structure, 17 feet below street level. The copper had not oxidized. The foreman, a man named Wilhelm Sprecher, wrote that it appeared, to his eye, to have been installed recently, though the tower's documented construction dated to 1659. Sprecher's log is held in the Wiener Stadt- und Landesarchiv. The entry for the tower demolition is in Volume 3, Folio 88. It has been transcribed once in a 1923 doctoral thesis on Viennese urban demolition practices, whose author noted the copper lining without comment and moved on. Buenos Aires, 1884. The demolition of the Torre del Reloj on the Plaza de la Victoria produced a newspaper account in La Prensa describing the discovery, at the tower's base, of a stone-lined underground chamber accessible through a sealed iron hatch in the tower's floor. The article ran on June 3, 1884. It was 3 paragraphs long. It quoted the demolition foreman as saying the chamber contained equipment he could not identify, metal components arranged in a pattern he described as purposeful, though he could not name the purpose. The article does not appear in any subsequent edition of La Prensa. No follow-up was published. The chamber is not mentioned in any official documentation of the demolition. This is not coincidence. This is a pattern. But here is what makes the Paris case different from every other account of suppressed tower investigations. In 1912, 34 years after Francis Devereux was reassigned from the Prefecture Archive. A drainage engineer named Marcel Arnaud was contracted by the prefecture to survey an anomalous moisture intrusion in the building's basement level. Arnaud was not told anything about the 1878 relocation. He had never heard of Francis Devereux. He spent 4 days in the basement, conducting measurements, and on the third day, moving a shelf of water-damaged ledgers to access a wall section. He found the door. He descended the 19 steps. He entered the chamber. He saw the tower. He did not write a report to the prefecture. He wrote a letter to his brother in Lyon that night, and in it he described what he had seen in terms that match, in every specific detail, the account Devereux had given his wife 34 years earlier: the pale gray stone, the sealed copper dome, the passage leading north. He added one detail that Devereux had not mentioned, or that Devereux's wife had not remembered, or that Devereux had perhaps not seen in the reach of his lantern. At the base of the tower, inside the stone drum of its lowest course, there was an opening, low, narrow, requiring a man to crouch to enter. Arnaud entered it. He followed it for approximately 40 meters before it widened into a second chamber. In that chamber he found 3 more towers, identical in construction to the first, arranged in a triangular formation with a spacing of approximately 12 meters between each. All 3 had sealed copper domes. All 3 had the same pale gray stone. And between them, connecting them at their bases through a system of fitted stone channels, was a lattice of conduit that Arnaud, who had spent 20 years working with drainage and water systems, said he did not recognize as any drainage system he had ever encountered. The channels were dry. They had been dry, by the evidence of their interior surface, for a very long time. Whatever they had carried, it was not water. Arnaud's letter to his brother is the only document that describes what he found. It is held in a private family collection in Lyon. A researcher who located it in 2007 photographed it and transcribed it. The transcription is available in a privately circulated research monograph that has never been submitted for academic peer review. Marcel Arnaud completed his drainage survey, submitted a routine moisture report to the prefecture, and was paid for his work. He never returned to the building. He died in 1931. The Prefecture de Police has never adequately addressed several specific questions about the structure beneath its archive. It is never explained why Henri Caille's 1878 notation, not the first time, exists in a misfiled inventory sheet if the matter it refers to has no official record. It is never explained what became of the written account that Francis Devereux submitted, which Caille documented receiving. It is never explained why a drainage engineer contracted for a routine moisture survey in 1912 submitted a report that contains no mention of the anomalous wall section, the door, the staircase, or the chamber that he described in detail in a private letter written the same night. Why were all 7 London towers assessed by Elias Vanthorpe demolished within 10 years of his assessment, after centuries of standing, while the missing 77 pages of his report have never been located? Why does the Washington Monument sit on a pre-existing vertical shaft that its own chief engineer documented in his field notes, and that no published history of the monument has ever cited? Why was a Buenos Aires newspaper's account of an unidentified underground chamber never followed up, never reprinted, and never referenced in any official demolition record? Why, in city after city, on 5 continents, across a period of roughly 90 years, was the same class of structure, stone towers with deep foundations, thick walls, and internal vertical shafts, identified, assessed, and then destroyed? The honest answer is that we do not know for certain. What we have are a misfiled notation, a private letter, field notes in the Library of Congress, a demolition foreman's log in Vienna, and a 3-paragraph newspaper article in Buenos Aires that ran once and was never repeated, and a pattern of institutional response in Paris, in London, in Washington, in Vienna, in Buenos Aires, that, even if it does not prove the underlying claim, is itself worth every minute of investigation it demands. For the next 23 years after he was reassigned, Francis Devereux processed documents in a satellite office 7 kilometers from the archive where he had spent the best years of his professional life. He did not appeal the reassignment. He did not submit a second account. He did not seek out anyone who might investigate what he had found. His granddaughter's letter does not explain his silence. It only records it, and records one other detail, that in his final year, bedridden with a lung condition in a flat on the Rue de Tolbiac, he asked his wife to bring him the city maps, the old ones, the ones from before Haussmann rebuilt Paris in the 1860s. He spent 3 days with those maps before he was too weak to hold them. His wife asked him what he was looking for. He told her he was trying to find the others. When she asked what he meant, he said the tower beneath the prefecture was not the only one, that the city had been built on top of a system, and that someone, before anyone living could remember, had put that system into the ground on purpose, and that whoever came after, whoever built the streets and the bridges and the government buildings, had known it was there, and had built above it, carefully, without disturbing it, for centuries. Until the century when they decided to take it apart. The chamber beneath the Paris prefecture is still there. The building stands today on the Rue de la Cité, its basement archive accessible to credentialed researchers who book appointments through the standard administrative process. The eastern wall of that archive is still a wall, or it is still a door. No researcher who has visited the archive in the decades since Marcel Arnaud descended those 19 steps has filed any account of what they found when they moved the shelf at the base of that section. That silence could mean the door is no longer there. It could mean no one has looked. Or it could mean that some researchers, like Francis Devereux, know what happens to the account when they submit it. The official history tells us that towers were built for bells, for clocks, for watching. What the foreman's logs and the field notes and the private letters tell us is that the men who demolished them found something inside that none of those explanations could account for. Copper linings in shafts, underground chambers, stone conduits between towers arranged in geometric formation. A system, not a ruin, a system that was still intact when they broke it apart. They did not write about it in the official record. They wrote about it in letters to their brothers, in journal entries on page 23, in notations on the back of misfiled inventory sheets. They wrote it in the only place they thought was safe. And some of those places held. These records survive because people refuse to stop looking. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. History does not disappear when it is buried. It disappears when no one looks for it. Next week, I am following a thread that connects the Paris tower system to a surveyor's report filed in 1861 with the Ottoman imperial government describing an identical arrangement of subsurface towers discovered during excavation work beneath the Sultanate district in Constantinople. A report that was acknowledged by the imperial court assigned a classification number and has not been seen in any archive since the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire in 1922. The classification number still appears in the index. The file it refers to does not.